Welcome back, listeners. So, Josh, in the first segment, we just talked about where we're sitting crop stage-wise and some of those common themes we're seeing out in the field. But as we hop into segment 2, we're also going to discuss what's another common question that we've just had out in the field. And a lot of that is being folks are starting to think about when they should start making that post-herbicide application, especially on the corn side of things. So I think we'll start there.
Yeah, that came up quite a bit last week too. Should we start spraying corn? Should we not? I think in some cases we've had this lull. We got done planting so early. We had this lull of like 2 weeks where it's like, oh, I feel like we should be doing something. But it's just been it's been a lot of years since we've actually been ahead of the game and maybe been on time with planting and spraying and everything else in between. But last week there was a corn. It just wasn't progressing. We talked about it in segment 1. In some cases, for how long it's been in the ground, it says we should be planting. It's been, 35, 40 days, and it seemed like we should be there, but it just wasn't quite there. But this week, I think we'll see corn spraying really pick up big time. And as with the rain and the heat now, you can really see the annual weeds coming, whether it just be on the edges of the field or some fields that maybe didn't have a pre-down, they're greening up pretty fast. So it'll be time to hit the fields, the corn full speed ahead here. And one thing, I had a few growers that this came up last week, and there might be some others that get spraying this week to think about this, but they were looking at, if we're a little bit early, should we make some adjustments to our residual herbicides? And that's something back in the day when I was doing a lot of sprayer X, I used to play that game quite a bit. When we'd start on the early side, we'd be spraying glyphosate with some residual, maybe some acetochlor and broadleaf with it. And commonly, I just bump that residual rate up, maybe, 10, 15% and just put a little bit more residual to make sure we buy our time to canopy. And then as the season progresses, I just tail that off as I get towards the end, just from a standpoint, we could get going, spread our risk of not getting in a rainy spell, but also maybe not increase the overall input that we kind of budgeted for. And that's not a bad thing to do. But certainly those giant ragweeds are showing up in full force across southeast Minnesota right now. It's going to be time.
Yeah, they are. And that's kind of the common theme that's another common theme as we get out and take a peek at these fields. So I think that's a nice overview on the corn side of things. But I think if we take a look at the soybean side of things and just maybe where our options sit there, if you look at, in some cases we have observed maybe some of those early weed breakthroughs due to the dry conditions following some of those pre's. But I think timely post applications that include that residual, like you mentioned, even on the corn side of thing, are going to be kind of that next to do on our list. So if you're an extend user, we've got that 45-day after planting cutoff, which could come before that June 20th cutoff in a year like this, potentially. I think for our enlist users, it's just nice to remember that you can spray up to that R3 window. So that does just give us some additional flexibility in terms of what options we have to really carry us through the season there. But any other thoughts on the soybean side of things?
Yeah, the slow emergence will be a little bit interesting. A lot of times I tell my producers that are today it's kind of like, okay, once we get 30 days after planting, it's probably getting close to our post-emerge application and layer residual. And this year that might stretch a little bit longer, strictly because of how cool it was through the growing season. Emergence took in some cases, again, 25, 30 days. And, we maybe would predict them to be a little bit further along. There'll be a little bit of scouting there we got to do. I do think that window will open really quick. Now with everything progressing so fast, it's going to change rapidly. And the big thing is just going to be to watch the weed height now. I'm probably not so concerned about how many days since planting, but we want to get that sprayed before any of those broadleafs get to 4 inches. And that's going to happen so rapidly now with this heat and rain and warm weather. So it'll have to be some scouting and then there'll be some, I guess for me, the soybean maybe the verdict is still out. A lot of fields look like it held okay. There might be some isolated ones that aren't quite there. I think it's going to boil down to if you had a history of pretty clean fields, the pre's are going to hold up okay. Maybe if there's a farm that's had some historical heavy weed pressure, we may need to jump the gun on that a little bit. But yeah, just a lot of scouting around weeds this year. It's been a unique growing season of how long some stuff's been in the ground. Residuals might be running out. Heat and rain came late, but now we also got to just put our boots on the ground and let scouting kind of make our decision when we pull the trigger on post applications for the soybeans. Yeah,
you bet. So I think, that's kind of our quick take on both the corn and soybean side of things on the pre. But before we wrap up here, Josh, have had a few questions on maybe folks have been waiting for some of this forage to be ready to cut. Any just observations from your conversations of where folks are sitting on some of that rye or alfalfa when that could potentially be ready to go?
Yeah, a lot of the rye, the flag leaves are out. It's in the boot stage. It's time to go. Some of it is actually maybe even starting to head out right now. But from a quality standpoint, that winter rye that we're going to chop, it's going to be the window is now. And I think the first crop alfalfa is going to kind of roll right into that. I anticipate to see, I've seen a little bit cut already, maybe a little bit early on that, but I anticipate here into this week and the weekend, we'll see quite a bit of first crop probably be ready there as well. And first crop's going to be interesting. The alfalfa kind of went through a rough stretch here this spring, and I've got going and then froze and then got going and then froze. And I'll be curious to see how that all shakes out from a yield standpoint. But in some ways, it's just nice to get it cut and get it reset and move on. But yeah, a lot of stuff going on, Allie. And next week, we'll have a lot more updates from the field.